everyone. Welcome to What's the Big Idea? Today I am joined by the phenomenal photographer, Brian Skerry. Truly, if you do not already follow him, which a lot of people already do on Instagram, I think you're approaching 1 million followers. Some of the best photography out there at Brian Skerry. Luckily, we've got him here today, here to talk about Secrets of the Whales, an upcoming series on Disney+.
Hello, Eric. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, and it's a real pleasure to be here with you.
Thank you. I mean, so Secrets of the Whales. It is. I love nature documentaries, and I've watched a ton of them. This is really the first one that appeals to that sense of like that they're very much like us. This one, the kind of thesis really feels like these creatures have amazing personalities, and it's more than just we've seen with whales. What kind of different personalities did you find as you were making this series?
Well, thank you for that question. And just to give some context, I would say that, you nailed it. I mean, that is the whole spirit of Secrets of the Whales. And it sort of came about when I created the project. It came about after a decade of research after my last big whale project for National Geographic and wanting to do a multi-species story. But the challenge for me was to find the right narrative. How was I going to connect the dots between humpbacks and sperm whales and belugas and all these different species? And I was reading a lot of scientific publications, talking to researchers, and I saw this theme of culture emerging within the scientific world. Things that, a few decades ago would have been taboo. They necessarily wouldn't have talked about that. But these dyed-in-the-wool scientists now were recognizing that cultures exist. And, I think a scientist that I worked with from the beginning of this project, who's become a great friend, Dr. Shane Garrow, who studies sperm whales in Dominica in the Caribbean, he described the difference between behavior and culture like this. He says, behavior is what we do, culture is how we do it. So for example, most humans eat food with utensils. That is behavior. But whether you use a knife and fork or chopsticks is your culture. Well, whales are doing the same thing. So you might have genetically identical species of whales in two different parts of the world, and they are doing things differently. The orca in New Zealand like to eat stingrays, and the ones in Patagonia like to predate on seal pups. And they develop feeding strategies to do that. And then they're passing on that knowledge to their children. So this is, definitely culture. So the multiple views that we see, I think, in Secrets of the Whales is that they do have culture. They do have this generational learning. They're not only teaching their children the things they need to know to survive in the world because they are not born with innate traits like humans, same thing, but they are also passing on their ancestral traditions, the things that are important to them. And we, as you started the question, we do see personality. We see that some whales are a little bolder, some are a little more shy. They exhibit joy. They truly exhibit joy. They play games. They exhibit grief. They, have singing competitions. So they, not to anthropomorphize them too much, but we don't need to. These are real things that are happening in whale cultures, in whale societies. And I think that is the message. It is really a series about the story of whales and their societies. And more importantly, perhaps, is that if humans, other than just being entertained by this, which is wonderful, but if we can see the ocean through the lens of culture with these animals, that's a game changer, because now we view our connection to the natural world perhaps in a different way.
I totally agree. I think that this is why I think this series is special, is because it does make me, in a far greater way than I had before, recognize that, these whales are like us. And in a sense of like, well, there's so much nature versus nurture. But I loved how you showed, here's how one pod hunts. Yeah. And it can be the same kind of food, hunting in a completely different way, different, effectiveness, but it's just like, it's kind of like a custom. This is just how we do it. And it's like, that's, to me, it's, you guys are, whales are a lot closer to us than I had previously thought.
Yeah, and we didn't get into this part in the series, but for example, orca, where we have this very rich hour-long episode, we could have done 5 episodes, I think, on just that. But there are orca cultures in the Pacific Northwest of North America that are so culturally tied to eating salmon, for example, that they would die. They will starve to death if they can't get those salmon because dams have been put into the rivers and they don't get the abundance of salmon anymore. And we know that orca are highly cognitive, probably the smartest animal in the ocean. They could easily, in my opinion, figure out ways to catch other things, but they would choose not to do that. They would rather die than change their culture. So I think, the more we know about animals like this, our perception of our planet, which is an ocean planet, is going to change. And I think that's very important if we're going to save this planet.
Now, you said orca, you would say, are probably the one, if not the, but one of the most intelligent animals that you were that are in this documentary. What would you say? This is kind of a slightly different, but what would you say is the species that is most like us? Where I recognize a little bit more humanity in this specific species.
It's a really interesting question. I think in many ways all of these animals mirror our sort of customs and behaviors in many different ways. But I would give an answer by saying that dolphins and whales are all related. They are all very close. Dolphins are just smaller versions of whales. They are toothed whales, right? So although they are in many ways alien to us, right? I mean, toothed whales like orca and sperm whales and all the species of dolphins, they see their world acoustically. They have good hearing and they have good eyesight, but so much, I think, of their world is sort of processed by echolocation and sonar. So they are very different than us. They have to close down only half of their brain when they sleep. They're voluntary breathers. They have to tell themselves to breathe, and they have to be aware of predators. So in many ways, they're alien to us, but I think that dolphins and orca, which are just the biggest species of dolphin, all whale, I think in many ways they are probably a lot more like humans, maybe than, let's say, I don't know, a humpback or something like that, because they are so clever. They are so cliquey. Sometimes, they have these sort of fusion fission societies where the males will all hang out together at certain times. And then they, come up to the females and they hang out together for a while. And, so I think we can't draw direct parallels, of course. But I think, they're very clever at figuring out how to solve problems, and they have high degrees of cognition. And, there have been examples of dolphins bullying other dolphins underwater.
That's human for sure.
I mean, it's like chimpanzees. I mean, Jane Goodall has showed us in Gombe of chimpanzees too, beautiful, adorable, loving animals, but they can get rough and tumble sometimes. So I think, maybe, again, just from my sort of own observations, I would say dolphins, orca, part of that, maybe a little bit more like us than we'd like to admit.
Yes, including the bad parts of us.
Yeah. Right.
Now, you have a rich history of photographing marine life. Is there one photograph that you've been unable to get, or what's something that is for lack of a better term, your white whale? What do you wish you had gotten?
Well, yeah, boy, that's a great question. For context, I would say this, that so much has happened in recent years in terms of technology. The cameras that I'm using today, DSLR cameras or video cameras, are light years ahead in terms of capability of what I was doing. It wasn't that long ago that I would go onto an assignment for National Geographic. I would shoot 500 rolls of film and not know what I had. I had 36 frames on a roll. I couldn't adjust the ISO. I was very limited. Today, I can go in the water and shoot 1,000 raw files. And if the clouds come over a sunny day, I can bump up the ISO. I have much more dynamic range. I can see how I'm doing instantly and adjust lighting and so forth. So I'm getting pictures these days that I dreamed about getting, a decade ago. So I'm very satisfied in terms of how things are going, that trajectory. That being said, of course, there are always things that you think about. With the whales, I mean, as many of the secrets that we revealed in Secrets of the Whales, that's just the tip of the iceberg. I think there's so much more. What's happening in the deep ocean, when a giant sperm whale, most of their life is spent in the deep ocean. They are foraging the majority of their days. They're going down 6, 7, 800 meters into the dark, deep, cold ocean, swimming through a prey field of squid. So you can imagine, Moby Dick swimming through in the darkness of the ocean, this thick biosphere of squid, and they're bouncing off of them, and they've got their mouths open, and they're echolocating. And imagine that picture, right? I mean, but we're not that far away from getting it. We're looking at this kind of stuff. It's possible. Maybe we could send an AUV, an autonomous vehicle that is programmed to follow the echolocations of a sperm whale, and if it could shoot in low light and sort of shadow the whale as he's going through that prey field, maybe we can get that picture. So I think it's an exciting time for photography and storytelling. But these are the kinds of things, giant billfish. I imagine a swordfish in the deep ocean with that big eye, hunting, or a marlin and things like that. These are the stories that stir my soul and keep me awake at night, but in a good way.
I love that. I hope that happens sooner or later. It sounds amazing. Before I let you go, this is just my own curiosity. Never been scuba diving before. Obviously, you are a pro. I'm sure I've heard conflicting things. Do you pee in the suit to stay warm? Is that true, or is that just something my friends are trying to trick me into?
All right. Well, I'm gonna give you a little longer answer on that. I always resisted the notion of peeing in the suit, right? I just thought it was terrible, and I didn't want to be, swimming around in that for any length of time. And I still try to resist. Now, that being said, when you're doing this kind of work, I get that wetsuit on now first thing in the morning. So if I'm on location for whales, I don't have the luxury of going out on a boat in my street clothes and saying, oh, there's a whale, let me put my wetsuit on. That would take too long. You have to get in the water. You have to get close to the whale quick, hope the whale lets you close. I can't use a 600 millimeter lens. I have to get very close to them. So that means when I'm doing these projects, I'm out there for 5 or 6 weeks in some locations. I'm wearing that wetsuit from 6 a.m. until 8 p.m. at night. I can't get out of it for long periods of time because something could happen and I got to get in the water. And that means that when you're in the water, if you're in the water for an hour or so, and you've been drinking a lot of Gatorade or water to hydrate because you're out in the hot sun, you gotta go. So
no shame.
Yep. So it has happened, and I will break news here and tell you that yes, I have peed in my wetsuit.
I'm glad.
It is not something that I look forward to doing. I think I have colleagues who actually look forward to that, but that's not me. So great question.
Well, thank you so much, Brian Skerry. And again, for viewers, Secrets of the Whales comes out Disney Plus April 22nd, right? Earth Day.
Yep, Earth Day.
It is fantastic. I urge everybody to check it out. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Eric. Real pleasure.
Bye.